Welcome back to the Elias Makos Show, second hour of the program, and we begin this second hour with François-Philippe Champagne, Minister of Finance, represents the riding of St. Maurice Champlain, and he's in studio on the campaign trail, but also serious business happening as well. Minister Champagne, welcome to the show. Thank you for coming on.
Good morning. I'm told it's one of the best shows in town, so I had to stop.
And he's buttering me up.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
like that.
We just start. Let's start on a good start.
And again, we're on the campaign trail. So, Mr. Champagne, I'll start off this way, and I'll give you some kudos. I mean, you were elected in 2015, right?
Yep.
And it seems since 2017 you've been a cabinet minister.
Yep.
And you get big roles. They don't give you the small dossiers; they give you some big roles, right? And now you're a minister of finance. So I want to start off with what the Prime Minister said in his ministerial role yesterday, Mark Carney. He had some tough talk about the relationship between Canada and the U.S. Have a listen.
The old relationship we had with the United States, based on deepening integration of our economies and tight security and military cooperations, is over. What exactly the United States does next is unclear. But what is clear is that we, as Canadians, have agency. We have power. We are masters in our own home. Nous sommes maîtres chez nous.
So it's over on the military and the economic. I want to know from you, what does that mean? We've got some serious programs with the U.S., Nexus, NORAD, you name it.
Yeah.
If this is ending, what does that mean?
I think what is different is there's a breach of trust. I think what we've seen is that 6 weeks has changed the world. The world's never going to look exactly the same because what you have is that your closest ally partner is basically turning its back on us, but not only on Canada, but it's turning its back on Europe, on its allies in Japan and South Korea. So in a sense, you get a realignment. My point is, for me, it's like a wake-up call. I go back to 1945 with CDAO, where we reinvented Canada. We built ships, we had aircraft carrier, we built planes, we had the locks. I mean, we kind of reinvented ourselves. So I think in the short term, there'll probably be turbulence, but I think in the long term, we'll be more resilient, we'll be stronger, and we'll be more ambitious as a nation.
So in your mind, the definitive it's over, maybe it's more accurately, it's different, not it's over?
Well, I mean, a number of things are going to be certainly different. What he said it's over is that the perception, since 1945, in a way, we've been under kind of the U.S. umbrella for defense. We've been relying on them for exports, proximity obviously helping, the Canadian dollar. And now it's like we need to mind for ourselves. We need to invest in ourselves. We need to look at what we can control. We can change what's going to happen south of the border, but we can change what we do in Canada. We can invest in ourselves. We can build infrastructure. We can have a Canada First procurement policy. We can have one economy, not 13 economy in the country. There's a lot of things that we can do, and we need action and speed.
So on doing things for ourselves, like we heard from Prime Minister Carney, if I look at the record from the last 10 years, right? So the International Monetary Fund just said that over the last 10 years, Canada's per capita GDP virtually grew 0%, while America's under Trump, Obama, Trump, Biden, Trump grew 22%. 0 versus 22. Why did that happen over the last 10 years?
Well, I would say there's a number of factors, but it just called the urgency for action and a new course for Canada. That's why I say it's kind of a new vision, because the last 6 weeks, and a lot of people have been asking me that question, in fairness. They say, well, you've been minister and now, you're looking in a different direction. And I said, that's true, but the world has changed in front of us. I mean, 6 weeks has changed the world in a way that I would suggest if you and I were on radio like in November, I'm not sure we could even have anticipated that kind of change. And now people are saying, let's do big things together.
But I think the concern is if in the last 10 years, our GDP per capita had grown 20% like the U.S., we'd be in a much stronger position. And I think people are wondering, why should they trust a fourth term of a Liberal government if the record from the last year showed quite a significant disparity between Canada and the US.
I would say that there's a clear change in the world, and that's our moment. I hope it's not only a moment, but it's a movement to suggest that, like I said, we have lived since 1945, I would say, and successive government, in all fairness. It's not just like the last government, but we've been in a place where naturally people were exporting, like in the United States. There's issues about productivity. Yeah. There was issue about how we're going to organize our nation. And now I say, listen, if you look at the world today, we are a big magnet for talent. We have huge industry. We produce planes, we produce cars, we produce ships. We have critical minerals that you need from anything from computer to semiconductors. We have abundant renewable energy, and we're the only G7 country with a free trade agreement with all the other G7 nations. So the fundamentals are right. I think it's like today you have a sense of unity in Canada, at least in my 10 years. I'm 54. Even in my lifetime, I've rarely seen people say, do more. Yeah. Let's be more ambitious. Let's go faster. You know, when you say, for example, one project, one evaluation of that project, those things really matter. And that's how you can do things differently and with a bold vision for the country.
Let me just ask you, because I know a key component of your tenure as minister, right, over the last, 7-8 years now, was to make things in this country more affordable, right? And I know you attempted on the grocery file. And I'm just wondering, why do you think we weren't successful? Talk about attracting things. We weren't successful at attracting international players, the Aldis, the Carrefours of the world that are in Europe. Why, the Littles, those companies. Why haven't we been successful at that?
Well, a couple of things. And I think no one can blame me for trying. I always say to people, it's going to be tough. Am I going to succeed? I don't know. But it's worth trying. One of the things we did, which is going to be probably the more, with time, people will see, was the reform on competition. I'll give you an example. When I was in office, we realized when you were talking to some of the players they said, Minister, we've been looking to come to Canada, but do you know, for example, that you had these restrictive covenant in leases, in commercial leases, that made that if you had like a grocery store and a shopping mall, let me talk about Shawinigan, there's one in the shopping mall, if that store was there, you could not have any other store within a radius of kilometers. Yeah. Worst, if they were to leave because of the restrictive covenant, you could not open another one. So you had like these food deserts. Yeah. So I know you would say, well, it sounds anecdotal, but I'm talking to one of the largest American chains that said, we looked, but you know what? We were only offered what they call C sites. Yeah. We could never be in a prime location because the way competition or the lack thereof was preventing even those who would have very deep pockets to invest in Canada. We changed that.
You did change that.
We made that illegal. So if that happens and you want to restrict competition with restrictive covenant, this is gone. This is of another era. Those are the kind of changes that are going to make, that have an impact. Now, to your question, is it short term? I wish. But I think it's going to take a bit of time. And now, obviously, with the friction you have in trade, things are getting far more difficult at this point. But we're going to focus on affordability for sure.
On changes to come if you get reelected here. But did we make mistakes? I'm looking at the EV, the battery dossier. We tried to pick. In Quebec, we picked Northvolt. Yeah. Picking of Volkswagen. Picking of... Let's partner and pick, as opposed to maybe a more broad thing where anyone can sort of take advantage of a program. Do you have second thoughts on how that's gone?
I'll put it to you. Yeah. I think if we didn't pick, we would not have landed these transformational, generational deals. And I'll put that in the book one day, but I'll give you a free chapter. Yeah. When I started as industry minister, we never had any European car makers looking at Canada. When I went to Germany to try to entice Volkswagen to invest here, people were almost laughing at me. They said, well, good luck. And you know what? Today, Volkswagen, their largest gigafactory that they plan to do outside of Germany is in Canada. Yeah. Now you would say, well, hold on, Minister. It's true. The market has shifted, but that should not be surprising, apart from the tariff. But, when you change technology after 100 years, I would say go read the book of Henry Ford, and you would see Tesla took 17 years to be profitable. Yeah. So when you change things that you've done the same thing for 100 years, you have changed the technology, consumer habits, supply chain. In addition now to a new administration, which is obviously changing the rules of the game.
And so what a headache does that mean now, the tariffs and how he wants to change the automotive industry?
Have you seen comments? I mean, I'm sure you read the U.S. press, but some have said, I think it's Jim Farley of Ford say this is going to bring chaos of costs. And another one say it's the Wild West on the factory floor. Because imagine now, you have these new tariffs and you have to figure out how they apply because the U.S. content in the car assembled in Canada is on average 50%. Now, if you have in these parts aluminum and steel, now you have to figure out by product code whether this is tariff or not, is this CUSMA compliant or not, is that, and because you have the exemption of the 50% coming from the U.S., I can tell you when I talk to to folks who have the real work of making it, work, they're pulling their hair. They say, how do you figure that out? And so I think, and you've seen the reports. I mean, some U.S. media were reporting that because there's not two car markets. That's the thing. There's one North American car industry and market. There's not like a Canadian one, American one. Why? Because the parts we've moved 7 times across the border. So some U.S. paper were reporting, I think yesterday, this morning, you could have price increase from like $3,000 to maybe $10,000. So my point is that the market has spoken. This is going to be detrimental to U.S. consumers. We always say a tariff on Canada is a tax on American. And I think people will have a tough wake-up when they're going to see their pickup truck increasing. And now they'll be questioned to the White House and saying, why do we do that to our best friend and best partner? Because actually, it's going to make us less competitive and increase costs in the United States. Why would we do that?
And of course, on something like cars that are already tremendously expensive. Let me wrap up with this, because there's no denying that all of this, the dark cloud of Donald Trump, has worked out well for the Liberals, at least in the polls. You look at the polling, you guys are doing really well. That wasn't the case a couple of months ago. If I could snap my fingers and give us a situation where the Donald Trump threat, the annexation, all that went away, poof into the night, and Canada now had a sort of stable place, but you guys were low in the polls, would you take that switch?
Well, I don't have a crystal ball. It's tough. I mean, I see your point. It's tough to imagine the world because we've been like 6 weeks has been changing so many things that we took for granted. Not just us, but like people. I meet people in the street, that your closest ally is picking up on Denmark.
Yeah.
You're like, really? Denmark? Of all places in the world. And now you say Canada. Even Americans, they said, honestly, I'll give you an example. I'll put that in the book again. But I spoke to a CEO yesterday. He said, we just don't understand why the U.S. would pick on Canada, of all countries in the world. And that's why we always make a distinction between the American people and the Trump administration. Because I know nobody, that I know of, at least, that wakes up in the morning and say, oh, how can I hurt Canada this morning? That's not the American people. They're like us in some ways. They look at these things and they say, what's going on? Price of things are going to increase, gas, groceries. Why are we doing that? So in my view, it's tough to imagine the world that you're seeing because 6 weeks has changed so many things that we've taken. I'm a bit older than you, I guess, but that we've been taking for granted for like our entire lives. And now someone turns their back and they say, okay, well, if your best friend turns your back on you, well, we have other friends. We'll deal with the Europeans. You heard the radar in the Arctic. We said, well, we'll take it from the Australian, by the way. Yeah. They do great things. Then we said, oh, maybe we'll look at fighter jets from Europe. Why not? So that's the point we're trying to say. We're a big country. We're going to be resilient. We're an ambitious nation. We have natural resources. We have markets. We have people. We have land mass. We have water. We have a lot of the things that are needed to succeed in the 21st century. So that's why I'm very, turbulence in the short term probably, but I would say I'm very confident that we're going to be more prosperous, more ambitious, and more resilient as a nation.
Mr. Champagne on the campaign trail, Minister Champagne in the serious roles, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks you for having me. Pleasure to be with you.
That's François-Philippe Champagne.